I'm Franco Bonafé. I am now a postdoc at the Max Planck Institute of Structure and Dynamics of Matter in Hamburg, Germany. And I did my PhD in quantum dynamics in Cordoba, in Argentina. So I will first introduce to you a little bit where I come from. Cordoba is a city and also a province. It has the same name of Argentina. Argentina is a country in South America, in case you've never heard of it. Cordoba has about 1.5 million inhabitants, and it has the oldest university of South America. It's called the Universidad Nacional de Córdoba. It is 407 years old, and that's where I studied. And as a matter of fact, we know that in Argentina we have one of the largest Armenian diasporas, Armenian communities of the world, the 10th largest community of Armenians in the world. And Cordoba in particular, there are around 4,000 or 5,000 people in this Armenian community in one of the neighborhoods of the city. So actually there are a lot of connections to the city. And I finished my PhD in 2018, and I moved to Germany at the beginning of 2019 to work in Hamburg. So where I live now is Hamburg in Germany. If you've never heard of it, well, it has a huge port, the Hafen, and it's famous for the Philharmonic, the Philharmonic building there. It's such a beautiful building. And what you can see here in the bottom image, let me see if I can activate the pointer. Yes, here, this is the institute where I work, so the MPSD. And I work at the theory department of the institute. So basically I am a chemist by training, actually, but I specialized in simulations, computer simulations, and also in some of the areas of quantum mechanics, quantum dynamics, some more physical areas, let's say. So now I'm a hybrid between a chemist, a bit of a physicist, and a bit of a programmer. So basically I work in the interface of these three disciplines. Let's start by dissecting a little bit the title of the talk and start working out some of the parts of the talk. I think I have around 40 minutes, right? So I will try to, yes?
Yeah, we can have like 40, 50, 60 minutes,
okay,
then we will have like some.
I will try to make it in 40 then. So basically, let's start by the part of supercomputing. Why do we need supercomputing, or what is the motivation for this? Well, you may know that in experimental science, some of the disciplines make progress by a slow and expensive method, right, of trial and error. So basically, some areas of science depend a lot in just running the same set of experiments for different materials and different samples, and find out which is the best for the application that one is searching for, right? But in some cases, scientific computing can help a lot to predict and explain these properties in a less expensive way, right? Because we do the experiments directly in the computer, and then we can select the candidate materials or the candidate systems that work the best on the computer to test them in real world, right? But sometimes these calculations, these simulations cannot run in a laptop or a desktop computer because of the size of the system or the magnitude of the system that one wants to study. So basically, that's why we have supercomputers, right? I say we have, but some countries have large supercomputers. I will talk to you a little bit more about that later. But basically, what is a supercomputer? There are many computers, which are called nodes, connected by a high-speed network, which is actually quite expensive. One of these network names is called InfiniBand, for example. It's much, much faster than an Ethernet network of the Ethernet cable that you plug in the computer normally. And then it also needs a huge cooling infrastructure, okay? So to give you a sense of how expensive to have a supercomputer is, you imagine that these many nodes that you may have, they should be around, I don't know, 50 nodes at least, let's say. They can be more than 100 to 100,000 of nodes. Okay, you can imagine that they are really good computers. Now, of course, you have to pay for these computers. Then the price of the network is comparable to the price of the computer itself. That's why it has to be a really high-speed network. Okay, so it's already you have the money that you need twice, and then you need twice that money to build the infrastructure for the cooling of the supercomputer, because the supercomputer is an extremely, okay, of course it dissipates a lot of heat, and if you don't cool it with water or with cold air, of course it doesn't last a day and it breaks down. So you have to build in some countries they have built a complete power plant at the site of the supercomputer building just to have energy for the supercomputer. Okay, so this gives you an idea of the tremendous amount of energy and money that you need for a supercomputer. And basically, I want to show you a video of how it actually, this picture makes you think that it's a nice place, this blue dim light and so on. It looks like a place for a party, but actually if you walk in a supercomputing facility, which I did last year in November, it sounds like this. Okay. So you give yourself an idea of how noisy this environment is. You have to get in with ear protection, of course, and you cannot talk inside, which is a pity because people know they want to explain you what is this supercomputer, what it's doing, what are the specifications, and you cannot hear. In particular, this supercomputer is called Cobra, and it's one of the supercomputers of the Max Planck Society where I work. Okay, it has over, as you can see here, more than 3,000 compute nodes, more than or almost 200,000 CPU cores. Compare that to any large computer that you can imagine. It's really massive. It also has a lot of GPUs. As you know, now in scientific computing, we also use GPUs like the graphic cards for gaming. We use the same technology to run simulations. And of course a lot of RAM, and this is the peak computational power that these machines have. Flops is floating point operations per second, and this is the petaflops. This is in the petaflops range, which is one of the largest supercomputers, but it doesn't even get to the top 10 of the supercomputers of the world. Let me just briefly tell you why it is important to have a big machine or several big machines. It gives, first of all, it gives you the chance as a country or as a city or as a university to accelerate your technology, industry, and innovation ecosystems, because it gives you the ability to simulate a lot of stuff. And if you have a lot of computing power, you will want to simulate really massive stuff for the industry. Okay, people will bring you different problems. If you have a small supercomputer, maybe they will ask you to simulate, I don't know, the dynamics on a race car or on a small plant, engineering plant or something like that. And if you have a huge supercomputer, you can think about aerospace, you can think about nuclear power plants, you can think about really massive stuff. Okay, so it really gives you leverage to accelerate your industry. It also, from the scientific point of view, it makes you independent of international collaborations, because we, for example, in Argentina, we had to make international collaborations with people, you know, in other countries that have huge supercomputers, and then we don't really decide completely independently our topics of work. We have to arrange with them something that is of interest of both groups. Okay, so it gives you also freedom to select and to choose your own projects. And it creates a local value chain, you know, so it creates local value and it creates a development chain around the hardware sector, around the cooling sector, or even the energy sector. Okay, so it really accelerates the ecosystem in that sense. And if you are interested in supercomputing, or it's also called HPC, high performance computing, you can follow any of these two Twitter accounts. These are very good Twitter accounts for experts working in HPC. There is a ranking, an international ranking for the supercomputers. It's called the top 500. So if you want, you can search for Google top 500, and you will see the complete list of the biggest 500 supercomputers in the world. And this is the performance share by country. So you can see there are three major players here: Japan, the United States, and China. And in lesser amount, France, Germany, okay, and the Netherlands, it's already quite small in that sense, okay? But it's the complete performance share of the machines they have, okay? It's not just the amount of supercomputers that they have or the largest supercomputer. For example, Italy has one of the largest supercomputers in the world, but it doesn't, well, it appears here in the ranking. Okay, so as I mentioned before, some of the applications for a supercomputer would be aerospace simulations, could be energy, could be nuclear power. But in our case, we're mostly interested in simulations for material science. And this will be the most important topic or the key point in this talk. So basically, this is a fast introduction about supercomputers, so we can talk a little bit more about the hardware and whatever you're interested in later as well. Okay, but let's move on with the other parts of the title because we're halfway through the introduction yet. And what is photo-induced molecular dynamics? So I don't know what is your main discipline, where you come from, but I'm assuming almost no previous knowledge in the topics of the talk. So I will start really from scratch, and I will try to go fast as well because it's a very complicated topic to develop from scratch. But of course, you can ask me whenever you want, or Arthur can tell me if you write something on the chat or whatever. So let's start. What is dynamics? First of all, let's think of what are dynamical equations. And dynamical equations, okay, I tried to not put any equations in the talk, okay? But I have 3 slides with equations that I could not remove whatsoever. So I'm sorry for that. I will try to be gentle with those slides. But let's start easy. So everyone has seen in secondary school the Newton's equations of motion, okay? So basically, this is the second Newton law. This is the most basic, dynamical equation that one can learn, okay? So basically what one says, an external force or a force in the system accelerates the system. What is the acceleration? The second derivative of the position, okay? So basically, if one can relate this equation to a differential equation, what is a differential equation? Something that relates a time derivative of a variable with the variable itself. Solving this equation gives us a dynamical equation, something that depends, so a function of the position or of the coordinate with respect of time. So if we know the position or the coordinate of the system with respect of time, we know how it will move under this external force, okay? And we can do very important things, for example, simulating a lunch in Angry Birds, for example, you know? So basically, we could know where the bird will fall if we solve this equation for x and y, and if we know the elastic constant of the elastic band, okay, the spring constant. And of course, we owe this all to Sir Isaac Newton. Okay, so these are Newtonian dynamics, classical dynamics. This could be already dynamics if we wanted to study dynamics, but for materials, things do not behave in a classical way, but they behave in a quantum way, okay? And then what is the most important quantum dynamical equation? Of course, is the time-dependent Schrödinger equation, which is what I've written here. And of course, we owe this to Erwin Schrödinger, okay? Which you may know, as always, from the Schrödinger's cat paradox, okay? So the cat is already there, waiting for us to call him and start talking about the cat. Let's not talk about the cat. But then, if you don't know about the cat, we can talk later, or you can search online. There are a lot of explanations about Schrödinger's cat. But let's focus on this equation, and we say, okay, we had this Newton equation which we could write as a differential equation. We solve this equation, and then we get, for example, the trajectory of an angry bird in space. And we can solve for different classical equations in a similar way. But how do we solve this equation? So I ask you, okay, now I give you this equation. This is the wave function. This is the Hamiltonian of the system. Okay, solve this equation. And you will make probably this face or something like that. Okay, so probably you're extremely confused about how really one could solve these dynamical equations. So basically, let's first of all think of why we're interested in the quantum nature of the side. So basically, why we choose the right-hand side to think of dynamics of materials. Basically, because everyday life objects, so big objects, a house, a cat, a chair, a table, whatever, does not normally behave in a quantum way. Okay, so basically, macroscopic objects do not obey the laws of quantum. I mean, they must obey the laws of quantum mechanics, of course, but they are not the energy spacings, let's say, or the sensitivity of these objects to the quantum equations is negligible. So basically, that's why they behave classically. There is no quantum behavior in macroscopic real life world, except for the biggest things that have been seen to behave in a quantum way are, for example, proteins, which are really large molecules. Okay, but at this scale, this is what people call Schrödinger kittens. If you look online, Schrödinger kittens, these are macroscopic or almost macroscopic objects, or microscopic, let's say, but still large objects that can behave in a quantum way. But nevertheless, in everyday life objects do not behave. So if we wanted to simulate something large, I don't know, like a piece, like a really big piece chunk of a semiconductor, and see how it absorbs light or whatever, we wouldn't need quantum dynamics. But atoms and molecules have electrons and nuclei, and the electrons and nuclei do behave in a quantum way. Okay, so basically what I have here is the water molecule, as you know, H2O, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. This is the electron density cloud outside around the molecule. As you know, the electrons are not and do not behave only as particles, but also as waves. And then they have a probability distribution around the atoms. And this would be something like this. It's more of a cloud. And when you solve the quantum equations for this, you don't get that the molecule can behave or absorb energy in any way. It can absorb energy in very specific ways, okay? And this is dictated by how the electrons are accommodated in the electronic levels of the molecule, okay? And this is what you get when you solve, for example, the electronic molecular orbitals of the water molecule, okay? And this is how these molecular orbitals look like in space. These indicate when you square them, when you calculate something that you can square these functions, you get the probability distribution of the electrons when the electrons are occupying these orbitals. Okay, so basically this is a simple case of a water molecule and a simple picture just to give you an idea of the fact that the atoms and the electrons, and the nuclei also can behave in a quantum way. And this is why, if we want to study materials in the nanoscale or in the molecular scale, so basically in the scale of a nanometer, which is 10 to the minus 9 meters, okay, or below that, we need to use quantum dynamics or quantum mechanics, okay? And how do we start, okay, or how do we do this? Basically, we need a Hamiltonian, and we just have to pick the proper Hamiltonian of the system. It is, I say, just have to pick the proper Hamiltonian. This is the matter of study of theoretical physics since, or one of the topics of study since the 1930s. And it's not a closed problem. There are many approximations because you cannot solve this equation. So this, from the theory side, is already a huge problem, okay? To find the right Hamiltonian. We don't know the exact way to solve the dynamics of a system which has more than 3 particles. We know only for 2 particles, okay? So basically, we have to focus on the quantum dynamics. And then in the title, if you remember, we have also photo-induced. Why do we want to do something photo-induced? Because we want to study the interaction of the matter with light. Okay, what is light? Is a range of the electromagnetic spectrum, as you can see here, between 400 and 800 nanometers approximately, which covers all the visible colors, okay? And each color has a frequency and an energy. You know that, right? So red has the least energy in the spectrum, so the smallest energy, and then you go all the way to blue and violet, and then you have the highest energy in the spectrum. That's in the visible spectrum. If you go below red, you are in infrared. So basically it's not visible, it's below red. And if you go above violet, you are in ultraviolet. Okay, so it's also not visible, and these are the damaging parts of the sun spectrum that can create problems in our skin or damage our skin and so on. Okay, so basically we are really interested in seeing how matter absorbs light. Why? Because it has very important applications. For example, it could lead us to better ways to do photothermal therapies, okay, to treat cancer and to treat tumors. It could also help us understand solar cells and how they work, okay, and how to create new solar cells that can be, I don't know, for example, painted in a tinted glass or in a tinted window, or they can be done in a way that they can be bent and they can be saved or stored somewhere else. Okay, there are several technologies in that sense. And of course, also it can let us, it can guide us through the path of getting hydrogen from water in a very cheap way. You know that hydrogen is a very good way to store energy because water can be split in hydrogen and oxygen. And then if we get the hydrogen, we can store it as the natural gas that we use. And then with this hydrogen, we can power cars and houses, energy, and so on. Okay, so basically, all three processes have to do with absorption of light. And this is why we want to simulate photoinduced absorption, so photoinduced dynamics. So how the materials absorb light and what do they do with this energy, okay? And this is another kind of, I want to guide you through these 4 steps, but you don't have to understand everything, just to tell you what it is to solve in a computer, this photoinduced dynamics of a system. First, we calculate with a similar equation than Schrödinger's equation. We calculate the ground state of the system. The ground state is where the electrons lie in the absence of an external perturbation. So basically, how the electrons are arranged in a system that is not under the perturbation of light or under any external thing that creates an excitation of these electrons, okay? Once we have this ground state, we add an extra term. So we start the calculation and we add an extra term to the Hamiltonian, which accounts for the external irradiation of light. So basically we incorporate the light into the simulation. This leads us to this differential equation that I told you before, this one that we have here, or a similar equation, an approximation to this one. And we integrate this equation in a computer. There are numerical methods to integrate this equation in a computer. And if the system is too big, of course, these wave functions or similar objects, similar computational structures that we have to represent these wave functions will be too big to work on a laptop or a desktop computer. And then we have to use supercomputers, okay? And we have to add parallelization. So, but basically that's how the whole idea of doing photo-induced molecular dynamics work. And then if we want, we can put it in a supercomputer and run it there, okay? So basically I will not, what was my main topic of work? It was working out the equations and the implementation, the computing implementation for the dynamical equations in one of these approximations of Schrödinger equations, which is called time-dependent DFT or time-dependent DFTB equations. Okay, this has been my main topic of work, and then the applications I have done myself and other people as well. So just to give you an idea of what is electron dynamics, okay, these are simulations done by my PhD advisor and a previous PhD student of his, and this is a metal nanoparticle. Okay, you don't see the metal nanoparticle here, but you will see the electron clouds, positive and negative accumulation of electrons around the metal nanoparticle when you excite the plasmon of the nanoparticle. The plasmon is a collective excitation of electrons in a metal. Okay, as you can see here in the equation, in the video, the electrons oscillate back and forth because you're driving the system with an external laser, which has this frequency. So there you have the other peak. There you can have the same peak again. And that's how the electron cloud oscillates until it saturates, okay? And then you see that it's saturating. These small points that you see have to do with the position of the atoms. That's where the atoms lie in the metal nanoparticle. Okay, basically you get the idea of what are we talking about when we say electron dynamics, okay? We're talking about this, how the electron move, okay? And basically that would be electron dynamics. So why molecular dynamics as well? Okay, because we're not only calculating the dynamics of electrons, but also of the nuclei of the system. And the nuclei of the system we consider to be classical. So there we solve the Newton's equations, okay? But for the electrons, we have to solve Schrödinger's equations. And we couple them together and we calculate their trajectory in time. As you will calculate the trajectory of the angry bird that was jumping from the elastic band, we calculate the trajectory of electrons or nuclei after an external perturbation of light. And why why is it important? Because this photo-induced nuclear motion, so the induced nuclear motion that happens, nuclear I mean that the atom's nuclei, right? They move. So they start moving after we irradiate them with light. And this is important to find better materials for solar cells, for example, or to understand the stability of DNA and RNA, why these molecules are so stable that gave rise to life, okay? Also, it can help us develop nanoelectronics that do not break, because nanoelectronics could, if you go very small scale, the currents there can make the cables or the nanowires break down. So if you know how how the nuclei move after you create the current, you will know how to develop better nanoelectronic devices. And also how to enhance the water photosplitting into hydrogen and oxygen, which I mentioned before. These are some of the applications that one could think of using these tools. But we are solving these equations in a very small time scale, okay? We're not solving the equations in a time scale that is perceptible for human beings or for angry birds. We are solving the equations for a time scale that is really small. It's on the order of femtoseconds. What is a femtosecond? So they have an idea, a femtosecond is the time it takes light to travel only 300 nanometers. And what is 300 nanometers? It's about the size of 3 coronaviruses, 3 coronavirus capsids, okay? So when the light passes through 3, this is 1 femtosecond. And our simulations are around 100, 200 femtoseconds, okay? So this is a scale that is really fast. You know, the light, of course, moves really fast. It takes 8 minutes to get to the sun from the Earth, or from the sun to the Earth, let's say, and it takes 1 femtosecond to run these 300 nanometers. But it is important to see the dynamics in this time scale. Why? Because charge separation, for example, in a solar cell device can occur in less than 100 femtoseconds. It can be in this time scale. This is where all the magic happens for a solar cell, okay? So if we know that we are separating charge and how we are separating charge, we have to look into this small time scale, which gives us the Schrödinger equation in time, integrating the Schrödinger equation in time, okay? And what methods and codes do we use? Okay, I have worked with 2 codes. I am a contributor in the development, in the programming of 2 computational codes for this. One is called DFTB+, which is based on DFTB, which is density functional tight binding, a more approximate method, but it's faster, and it's in GitHub. You can copy the link and check it out for yourself from GitHub. And the other method that I'm working now on the other code I'm working on during my postdoc now is called Octopus, which is based on DFT, so density functional theory. It's less approximate, it's much more accurate, and it takes, of course, much more time to run. But it allows you to work and understand others in other systems. And the code is in GitLab, which you can also get for free. Both codes are open source codes, so you can get them You can see the source. You can even be contributors to the code, or you can use it and test it and so on. So basically, let's try now to see some applications of these tools. Let's start with something I did during my PhD. As I told you, I did my PhD in Cordoba in Argentina, but I did some parts in collaboration with the University of Bremen in Germany. Okay, and this was in collaboration with Balint Aradi and Thomas Framingham from Bremen, and this is my PhD advisor, Christian Sanchez. And basically, what is the breathing of metal nanoparticles? You would think I'm crazy. How a nanoparticle could breathe if it doesn't have a life? Okay, basically, it's something that people back in the 90s found out during these pump probe experiments, which are pumping a system with a laser pulse, a strong laser pulse, and then probing the system. So basically sending more weaker laser pulses to see what is the state of the system at different times. And they saw these oscillations, as you can see here, see oscillations. Then if you subtract the exponential background of this, you get something like this. And then they found out that these oscillations correspond to the breathing mode of a metal nanoparticle. What is the breathing vibrational mode? It's the most symmetrical mode that the nuclei have. So the most symmetric nuclear mode, which is an expansion of the nanoparticle atoms and then a contraction, an expansion, a contraction, an expansion, a contraction. That's why it's called breathing. Okay, similar to breathing. What mechanism drives this? So after some years, people found out that it happened in this way. So you excite the system with a laser pulse, you create this plasmon resonance. Then it creates an electron distribution that is non-thermal, so it's basically excited electrons. These electrons interact with themselves and create a hot electron distribution. And these hot electrons have to dissipate their energy somewhere. Where do they put their energy? They put it in the nuclei of the atoms. So basically they dissipate the energy to the nuclei through a process that is called electron phonon scattering. But it's basically heat transfer from the electrons to the nuclei. Okay, and this electron phonon scattering occurs in a time scale of 1 picosecond, which is 1,000 femtosecond. Okay, so it's 3 orders of magnitude more than the femtoseconds. So basically, through this picture, you create the vibrational resonances. So basically, the breathing mode, the oscillations. But what would happen if one found that we have also vibrational resonances in less time than 1 picosecond? This picture would be wrong, or at least it would be incomplete. Okay, so basically our question is this the whole story? Do we need heat transfer to cause the nuclei to move, or can we have another mechanism that sets them in motion faster? And why is this important? Because if someone does an experiment in a shorter time scale than these people did in the 90s, they wouldn't expect to see any breathing oscillations. But as we found out, there are some breathing oscillations. So let me show you in this video. This would be a 25 femtosecond pulse acting on this metal nanoparticle, which has only 55 atoms, and it has 1 nanometer in diameter. It's a silver metal nanoparticle, okay? And this is how the trajectory that we calculated. You will see here the field, the external field, on the top of so around here you will see the field, and around here you will see the radius, the oscillation of the radius. So basically the field acts very, very quickly. It's a very small pulse, but then after that, you see the particle, the radius of the particle increases, decreases, increases, decreases, and you can see that also here. You can see the breathing, okay? One more time. The field acts very quickly, but then the nanoparticle breathes freely. And we want to know why. This "pur si muove" is a phrase of Galileo when he found out, yes. Okay, so some of his findings, let me not go into that topic because we will never finish. Okay, so basically we have studied also the nanoparticle radius, how it oscillates in time. This is the radius. So here you can see the breathing increasing, decreasing, increasing, decreasing. A different size of nanoparticles. These are the number of atoms and the different external fields So here we increase the external field intensity. And we see that if we increase the external field intensity, the displacement of the radius increases. So it goes from 0.04 angstroms to around 0.2 angstroms. And then this period of oscillation is linear with the diameter of the nanoparticle. Sorry about the axis of the plots are in Spanish because these are from another talk. This is the diameter and the period of the oscillations. And you can see that these are several calculations, and it matches, our calculation is the one, this called TDDFTB, so the triangles, and it matches approximately the other trends, the blue and the green trends, which are specifically the period of the breathing mode calculated with other methods. Have checked that what we see is the breathing mode in all cases. And why does this happen? Okay, let's take a look at the bonds. This plot is a very, very complicated plot, but it's basically the change in the bond energy of all the bonds in the nanoparticle, of all pairwise bonds. So this atom with this atom with this atom with this, all the atoms against all the atoms of the nanoparticle, okay? And we see that some bonds oscillate around their value, their normal value, but some bonds increase their energy. What is an increase in an energy of something? Is weakening the bonds. If the energy increases, it means that the bonds get weaker. And which bonds get weaker? As you can see here, the bonds at the vertices of the nanoparticle get weaker. Okay, but the mean, this dashed line is the mean bond energy, increases also, and then it stays in this value. What does it mean that it stays in this value? It means that it has absorbed energy, and now the nanoparticle is the bonds of the nanoparticle are on average weaker than at the beginning. What has happened? Basically, we have transferred electrons which were in bonding orbitals, so we're creating actually the bonds, to anti-bonding orbitals, which are orbitals, electronic orbitals that make the atoms go further apart. And if we populate these orbitals, basically we are weakening the bonds and we are setting the nanoparticle in motion. Okay, this mechanism is called displacive excitation. And we found then that not only the mechanism that I showed you here before here is the one that is responsible for the oscillations, but we also have this other mechanism, okay, this displacive excitation, which is also responsible for setting the oscillations. Basically, what is the question? Which mechanism is it? The heat transfer to the nuclei or the displacive excitation? Well, it's actually both. Okay, this is the one that was reported in the literature. This works for bigger nanoparticles, for longer times, for scales that are accessible to the experiments. But the displacive excitation works for scales that are accessible to the simulations, which were not found in experiments before. Okay, so basically these both are acting together. And this is an important thing because, as Richard Feynman said, there is plenty of room at the bottom. And this phrase is one of the most important phrases for nanotechnology. It means that we still have a lot to learn from things at very, very small scales. But it also works not only for space scales, so nanotechnology, nano particles, but also in time, okay? In this femtosecond dynamics, in this really, really ultra-fast dynamics, we found things that were not found before, okay? And this means that there are plenty of room at the bottom yet to study as well. Okay, so this was the first application. Let's see another one that you might find interesting. If I say ultra-fast charge separation in a blah, blah, blah complex, what does it mean? It means that we are studying something that could lead to a solar cell, okay? We are separating charge in a complex of two materials that are attached together, and there is an electron traveling from one material to the other, okay? Sorry, this work was done by Charlie Medrano, who was a PhD student with me in the group, and our PhD advisor using our code. Okay, so basically what is the mechanism of this? It's very simple. We have this molecule that is called PDI. This molecule absorbs light, is a dye, so it absorbs light. And when it absorbs light, it can get electrons from other materials that are attached to it, okay? So it absorbs light, but it's an acceptor of electrons. And what Charlie did was attach it to a nanodiamond. A nanodiamond is just a base. We have here basically 4 nanodiamonds of different sizes. It's just a small structure of diamond. Okay, this you can get in the lab quite easily. It's not as expensive as diamond. Okay, and this has the ability to deliver charge. Okay, so it can give charge. It's a donor. Okay. What is the importance of this? This prototypical device could be used in the future for a solar cell if it turns out to be technologically possible to fabricate, okay? And basically it has a very, very interesting mechanism of charge transfer that Charlie has studied. So let me show you how it works. Basically, we have an external pulse of light that is irradiated into the system. Here you can see in this plot the duration of the pulse of light. It takes 50 femtoseconds. And during these 50 femtoseconds, the pulse of light initiates the charge transfer dynamics, okay, in which you can see here the charge of the PDI molecule decreases because it's accepting electrons, right? The electrons are negative in charge, so that's why it decreases. And the charge of the nanodiamond increases. So it's delivering charge, it's getting positive, okay? And this happens in an ultra fast way. In 100 femtoseconds, the nanodiamond has delivered the electron to the PDI, okay? And what he studied as well was a mechanism in 3 stages, okay? So basically, first of all, you see the charge. So this rho mole here, as you can see here, rho mole is the orbital population in some orbitals he chose. I will not go into too much detail here, but what you can see in the first 25 femtoseconds, the PDI orbitals are involved. Basically, the PDI is transferring electrons from the HOMO of the molecule, which is the highest occupied molecular orbital. This is HOMO for us, and into the LUMO, the lowest unoccupied molecular orbital, okay? And this is what you're seeing here. This is the population of the LUMO is increasing, and this is the population of the HOMO is decreasing. And then it goes into a reorganization phase in which the charge transfer starts increasing a lot. It starts getting charge from the nanodiamond a lot, yes, and finally it starts stabilizing again, and it reaches the final value, okay? So basically, this is a mechanism in which he called it a trapdoor-like mechanism. Because why a trapdoor? Once the electron is gone, it cannot go back. And why is this important? Because in solar cells, the major problem is electron recombination or electron hole recombination, okay? So basically you transfer the electrons, but then they recombine sometimes. They go back and recombine. And if they recombine, you have lost the possibility to absorb light, okay? You don't want them to recombine. You want them to migrate in different directions, in opposite directions, and be recombined after the external circuit is closed, in which you can put a lamp or something that uses electricity, and then you get electricity, okay? But in this case, this would be a nice prototypical case, okay? But what happens now if we enable the nuclear motion? You remember that I told you at the beginning we have electrons and nuclei. Here we are propagating only the electrons. So the charge transfer that we are seeing is due to the electrons only, but the nuclei are held fixed. It's like we are fixing them, okay, with a nail and a hammer, and they cannot move. So what happens if we let them move, okay? Okay, if we let them move, this was the black curve was the case that I showed you before, atoms, nuclei fixed. If we let them move, now the charge transfer decreases by half. So not very good news, okay? So we have less charge transfer, but it's important to know that we will have less charge transfer, okay? These other curves are when we do the molecular dynamics starting from a thermal ensemble. So basically at 300 Kelvin, which is room temperature, we would get even less charge, but not too much less charge, okay? But the idea is that we also are interested in studying this at real life conditions. We don't want to be able to use the solar cell you know, in a cryogenic environment, but we wanted to use it in a real life scenario. So that's why we want to study also the dependence with temperature. But even without temperature, so starting from 0 Kelvin, we see this behavior. It decreases by half. And why is that? Okay, now the nuclei are moving. Let's check that. Here you can see what happens in the simulation. Again, this is the breathing motion, but now the nanodiamond is breathing, okay? And this dynamics is 200 femtoseconds of dynamics. So the nuclear motion of the system absorbs as well. It dissipates the energy that the system has absorbed in some way, and as it dissipates the energy, it's less energy that goes into transferring charge. Okay, and now we have less energy into transferring charge, then we have less charge transfer. Fine. So that's why it is important to include nuclear dynamics or molecular dynamics as well in the photo-induced processes. And let me now jump to the third and last application that I will tell you about. This is the job, my main job at the moment, and it's some work that I'm continuing from a previous PhD student of the group in Hamburg. It's called René, and my two supervisors, Heiko Appel and Angel Rubio. And basically, now we are also interested not only in propagating the electrons and the nuclei of the system, but also in propagating light itself. And what dictates the dynamics of electromagnetic fields? Well, these are Maxwell's equations, of course. Yes, you may recall from some other talk or from some class. These are the electromagnetic equations, as you can see here in this T-shirt, which is not yet in my collection, so in my collection of nerd T-shirts, but I will buy it soon, probably. And then these equations rule the dynamics of light. Okay, we have the electric field and the magnetic field. And this indicates, okay, these are also differential equations, okay? And what do we need to know in order to know what electromagnetic fields we will have? We have here the current, and we have the charge density. That is all we need, the current and the charge density, and the properties of the medium, of course, the permittivity and so on. But if we know the current and the charge density, we know if we will create light or not. And in molecular systems or in materials, we can induce charges, okay? We can induce currents, and these currents will create fields or can create fields. And it would be awesome to be able to, make some light in the computer as well and understand how we can create this light or this field. And there is a way to do this. Okay, this is the other slide with equations. Let's not pay too much attention to it, but let me tell you why it's here. Basically, these equations would need some other computational code to be integrated. But what we have is a code that is able to solve Schrödinger's equation in time. What would happen if we were able to write these 4 equations in a form that resembles Schrödinger's equations? Okay, if it resembles Schrödinger's equations, we can calculate it with our computer code that we already have. Okay, and we mimic, instead of calculating the propagation of electrons, we're calculating the propagation of light. But the code doesn't know. The code thinks it's just calculating Schrödinger's equation. So basically, there is a way to do this. It's called the Riemann-Silberstein representation. And basically, this is writing this complex vector, which is an artificial vector. It doesn't have a physical meaning. It's called a Riemann-Silberstein vector, which includes the electric field in the real part and the magnetic field in the imaginary part. So it's a complex vector that has both, okay? And if we write the equation, this vector like this, these 2 equations, the 2 Gauss laws, can be written as one equation. And these 2 equations, the Faraday and the Ampere laws, can be written as only one equation as well. So we turn 4 real Maxwell equations into 2 complex equations, okay? And this complex equation, if we do a little more algebra, we can rewrite this equation that we have here like this. And if we rewrite it like this, we see that on the right-hand side we have the time. This is the time derivative as well. Okay, this is the same as this symbol here. It's the time derivative of this field, of this vector, something times the vector itself minus something else. So this something here can be thought of as the Hamiltonian of the system, okay, between quotation marks, because it's not a real Hamiltonian. This is not a quantum equation, but it resembles mathematically Schrödinger's equation, okay? So this could work inside the code as the Hamiltonian, or as this H here, and this could work as an inhomogeneity, so something else that we have to add. But this is where the current contributions come, okay? So we do this, and these are Maxwell's equations written in Schrödinger form. So we have combined Maxwell and Schrödinger, we have written one equation. And now we can couple it with quantum dynamics. And this is what we call Maxwell time-dependent density function theory. Long name, we say Maxwell TDDFT, okay? And this method is published here in this paper, which I also leave at the end of the talk if you want to take a look. It's a very, very powerful method because it's not only useful for small system, for microscopic Maxwell equations. It can also be used for macroscopic calculations. So we can calculate optics now. We can put lenses inside the code. We can calculate how light passes through lenses, how light evolves in different ways, okay? So I will show you a couple of examples of what we can do with this, and then I'm done with the talk. One example I will show you here. Basically, this is our simulation box. Here, I don't know if you see the mouse pointer. This is our simulation box. We have a molecule at the center of the box. This molecule is called azulene, which has a shape, well, you cannot see it from here, but it's a 5-ring attached to a 6-ring of carbon atoms with hydrogens outside. And it's a very, very small molecule, so we will multiply its size by 2000 in order to make it visible at the same scale the light, because a light pulse is much, much larger than a molecule, okay? So we will multiply it, and this object here, yes, it is the light pulse. So this light pulse will move towards the molecule, will interact with the molecule, and will cause the molecule to break down, basically, okay? Because it will excite, we will remove electrons from the molecule. It will tear the molecule apart because of removing the electrons. Now let's see the video and I will explain. So as I told you, we are increasing the size of the molecule in order to be comparable to the size of the light, artificially, of course, right? And then we send the pulse of light. Now it's interacting through the molecule. You can also see it here. Here's the molecule standing. And these are the oscillations that is causing the molecule, because the light is an oscillating wave, and then it causes the molecule to oscillate. Now, the light pulse has already passed to the molecule, so the molecule won't oscillate anymore. But also it has removed a lot of electrons from the molecule. Yes, so now we have, remember that the nuclei of the molecules are positive in charge, okay? So if you remove the electrons from a system, what do you have? You have a bunch of positive charges, okay? And a positive and positive repel each other. So now the nuclei will want to move further apart and explode. This is what's called a Coulomb explosion of the system, okay? And now as you see, the nuclei are moving further apart because of a Coulomb explosion, okay? And the light pulse is getting absorbed by the boundaries of the box, okay? So you can see here, we still have some electric field that comes from the molecule itself because it's still oscillating a little bit. Okay, this is one example. Let's go to the other example. This is a coronine molecule. Let me start it so you can see. A coronine molecule, it looks like this. So it's let's say 6 or 7 benzene rings attached to each other. And we will apply an external magnetic field that is perpendicular to the position of the molecule, okay? And we will see what happens. So here is the static magnetic field that is perpendicular to the position of the molecule. What is happening here? First of all, yes, okay, let me just play it. You will see some excitation of the electrons of the system. The electrons want to go further apart because they are circulating, okay? But the simulation box has a size, and then the electrons are confined in this simulation box size, and they will start rotating because the magnetic field makes charges rotate, okay? But since all the electrons are outside, we have no more electrons doing the bonds of the molecule. So the molecule starts again breaking down and breaking apart, okay? And basically, this is what happens with an external field, okay? There are many plots here, but you just have to focus on the current and the external field, okay? And basically this is it. So these are two examples that we got. And with that, I would like to thank you. I will leave you here the papers about the topics that we have studied. And of course, thank you all. Thanks to all of you for your attention. Here are my contact details in case you want to write me or ask me anything. Thanks.